Mm. Greetings to baristas. I've been doing these videos for a couple of years now, and my schedule is subject to change, and I may not be doing them as frequently as in the past, but I'm still going to try to get my face out here to you as much as possible, like it or not. Anyway, Marx wrote in Chapter 2 of the Communist Manifesto that the working men have no country. We cannot take from them what they have not got. This was true at the time of his writing, when capitalism was breaking down the dynastic states of old Europe, creating the modern nation state which we are told to love, and whose flags we must salute, and whose anthems we must tis of day sing. Since these states were the creation of rising middle classes who identified themselves as the people, the states they created reflected their class, which means the majority of real citizens were effectively excluded from meaningful participation. Hence the old slogan, "This is a republic, not a democracy," usually adding, "Let's keep it that way." Nationalism became the last refuge of scoundrels and the first shield of capitalism. But as Marx outlined in the same work, capitalism grew too big for its 18th century pantaloons, its head too fat for its powdered periwig. While the working majority was still excluded from participation in the state, and hung for high treason against the state when fighting against the rule of property, the capitalist owners were themselves quietly bypassing state sovereignty by the free movement of capital across increasingly irrelevant national borders. They were creating international bonds to supersede national boundaries. At the same time, they were consolidating their power within those borders. The socialist movement attempted to endgame its class adversary by advocating internationalism. Let the bourgeoisie claim the nation state, we're going for the real prize, which is the universal redemption of humanity without borders. In practice, though, once socialism acquired power, socialist states had a vested interest in national sovereignty too, just like their bourgeois predecessors, with all the pitfalls that entailed. While the socialist world was still dealing with the 19th century state formations, capital was entering the 21st with borderless capital technology. This was dramatically illustrated by the Western powers preaching the virtues of national sovereignty against the Soviet Union, the Soviet bloc, and the Yugoslav Federation, while itself combining in the European Union to enhance the free flow of finance. In the USA, we see the ironic situation of a working class committed to American bourgeois patriotism of the 19th century, while the ruling social and political elites in Washington and New York scorned passé patriotism as they outsourced capital and jobs and wars to their market peripheries. Marx's solution was to advocate that, since the proletariat must first of all acquire political supremacy, must rise to be the leading class of the nation, must constitute itself the nation, it is, so far, itself national, though not in the bourgeois sense of the word. Meaning if the nation and its resources belong to the majority, and not just to a few wealthy families, the nation-state would not be at cross purposes with its people, any more than a family farmer is at cross purpose with his own land. The concentration of people in great urban centers to serve the needs of concentrated capital would also not be necessary. Population could be equitably distributed like property. Because far from being the enemy of capital like Ayn Rand and her disciples advocate, the state has been indispensable to its creation. In law and military power and central bureaucracy, capital has aided the growth of state power because state power was necessary for the growth and protection of concentrated capital. As long as the state serves these needs, capitalism has no quarrel with the state. It's only when the state began serving the needs of the majority did we see the rise of anarcho-capitalism. The Western internationalist capitalist hated the Soviet Union not for the so-called Asian mode of production, that is, state-mandated production with no room for the individual entrepreneur capitalist. He got along quite well with Japan, for instance, or, for that matter, Bismarckian and National Socialist Germany, especially when these states suppressed labor and kept women in line as baby machines. No, the real beef with the USSR was its official ideology of the public good, with its malpractice offered as proof that the public good was no good. So anything advocating the public or common good was tied to the political formation of the Soviet Union. Anything that enabled the poor to live longer, live better, to read and write and send their kids to college was the first step to a gulag. Altruism equaled Stalin's mass terror, while egoism enshrined the greatest good for all. The only way out of this conundrum is to take the state as Marx advocated, not back, since we were never a party to its multi-party institutions, but to make it really our own, and make it serve, for the first time in history, the interests of we the people, and show that altruism is not equal to a chain gang, that self-sufficiency is not the lifeline you throw a drowning man for his own good. To make this a land made for you and me, as Woody Guthrie sang, And as another Okie Ma Jode said at the end of The Grapes of Wrath, rich men die off because their kids ain't no good, but we still keep a comin' because we're the people that live. So, what would such a nation actually ruled by, of, and for the people look like? It would be a nation that did not need to suck up half the productive wealth of the world or half its own productive wealth into military empire and to project an empire by force of arms to dominate the globe. There would be no corporate power to need any such thing to keep itself in business. There would be no national security state because we don't need a police state to enjoy self-government. It would be a nation that could coexist with other nations of the earth because it has no axe to grind, no need to make the rest of the world respect it the way you respect a mafia don. It would be a nation dedicated to the welfare of its families. Yes, I said welfare, what the fuck of it? Seeing they're well housed, fed, and clothed, their medical needs provided for, from prenatal ultrasound to nursing home. It would be a nation that could live within its means and not have to rob the rest of the world imitating a rich man's lifestyle with which it can never keep up, no matter how deeply in debt it goes. Thus, there would be no need to use plastic over paper in daily commerce. It might come closest to the biblical standard of each in his own dwelling, with his own vine and fig tree, unencumbered by a 30-year mortgage to mass-market swindlers who will rob him and be allowed to get away with it, by pussy presidents and pussy federal governments who love to fuck the likes of Saddam and Gaddafi, but whose justice and other departments bend over and take it up the ass when Wall Street rings its whorehouse doorbell. Hey, who's knocking on the YouTube line? Hello? Abe Lincoln? Well, there's a voice we hear a lot of nowadays. Looks like you're going to win an Oscar this year, too. What's that? That's just an actor playing you? Because no one really cares what the real you said? Like about government of, by, and for the people not perishing from the earth? Because it's gone already. It's like your other famous adage. You can fool most of the people most of the time if you mark it up just to mark it down and call it a sale. Or something like that.